revealed the incredible door behind the painting that changed a billionaire's life forever. Jonah Grayson stood in the attic, every beam of dust swirling in the late afternoon light, telling tales of faded glory and dreams unfulfilled. Deep in his father's old workshop, a cracked wall panel caught his eye, the kind that hadn't seen attention in years. Hesitation swallowed him. Was it wrong to pry? This house was steeped in memories, his father's ghost looming over every forgotten corner. Yet curiosity gnawed at his insides. Gently, he peeled the panel back, exposing a hidden painting, an untouched canvas whose vibrant colors seemed to beckon him closer, igniting a spark long buried beneath bills and worries. My God, what could this mean? Heart racing, he pulled it free, the dust scattering like the remnants of lost hopes. The intricacies of the brushwork stirred something deep within him. The mere sight sent waves of conflicting emotions crashing through him. This wasn't just a painting, it was a relic tied to a fortune built on the backs of families like his, an empire forged in suffering. For a fleeting moment, it felt like a betrayal, unleashing years of suppressed anger within him. Jonah's struggle wasn't just with financial hardships, it was a heart-wrenching fight against a legacy that had been twisted and exploited. As he brushed dust from the edges, long-forgotten memories flooded his mind. The oil paint glistened under his fingertips, and with every stroke he felt the weight of his ancestors' pain. Who was he to restore this? What if restoring it meant confronting that billionaire, a man who wielded his forebears' dreams as control? Jonah's stomach knotted. Silent pressure mounted as he contemplated if he should seek justice or remain anchored in his family's past. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Jonah hesitated, his brush laying still in the paint, imagination swirling with thoughts of confrontation. What would he say? How could he even approach this man whose wealth loomed so heavily over his family's struggles? It seemed easier to sink back into anonymity, to let the painting go, to honor his father's quiet resolve, even if it meant letting that ghost haunt him indefinitely. But then the colors vivifying the canvas seemed to throb with life, urging him to dig deeper. Each brushstroke stirred hidden creativity he thought had vanished long ago, unraveling layers of potential as he reconnected with his art. Yet within that spark lay his ultimate fear, the risk of losing everything again. Would restoring this painting fulfill a legacy, or simply deepen the scars of betrayal and hardship? Looming questions twisted through him as he stood, frozen in front of the painting, facing waves of anguish and yearning for answers. A decision loomed, demanding action, but offering no clear path, a choice that would reshape everything. Torn between anger and responsibility, he stood alone amid echoes of the past, feeling the shadows of old wounds whisper against his soul, pushing him toward a crossroads he had dreaded for far too long. The paintbrush trembled in Jonah's hands as he contemplated the weight of his decision. Time stretched, each second throbbing with the potential for transformation. He could still retreat into the safety of inaction, allowing the painting to fade back into the shadows of the attic. Or he could embrace the uncertainty and harness his long-buried creativity to confront his past head-on. With a deep breath, he set the brush down and stepped back, forcing his racing thoughts to coalesce into clarity. Was this merely about art? About restoring a painting? There was a deeper narrative at play, one woven through the struggles of his family, each brushstroke on that canvas a thread of their collective agony and resilience. This was more than a painting. It was a commentary on the history of exploitation that had shaped his life and the lives of those before him. Jonah grabbed a nearby notebook. He had to document his thoughts, chart a course through the turbulence that gripped his heart. The pages filled rapidly with frenzied sketches of the painting, notes about the emotions it stirred, and questions that clawed at him. What if he could turn his father's legacy into a beacon of hope instead of an anchor of despair? What if this painting could be the means to reclaim his family's story? He wanted to repair more than just the torn canvas. He longed to mend the frayed fabric of his heritage. In that moment, a wave of determination surged through him. Jonah could channel his grief into something purposeful. But that led to a new dilemma: how to confront the billionaire heir who controlled the narrative of suffering that linked them. The world around him faded, and he was left alone with his fears, each whisper echoing louder than the last. Would he have the courage to confront the man whose actions had stemmed from generations of pain? For too long he had cowered in silence. Now, with the painting awakening his spirit, why not take a stand? His heart raced as he thought of the possibilities, the potential for collaboration or confrontation. The attic, once merely a space of storage and neglect, began to transform into a sanctuary of creativity. Jonah could almost hear the painting call him to take action. He envisioned unveiling it in a gallery, using it as a bridge to share his family's story and connect with others who suffered similarly. It would be a testimony against the opulence that had masked their pain for so long. A sense of urgency gripped him. Jonah's mind exploded with ideas, his notebook barely able to contain the fervor of his rediscovered passion for art. As he began sketching the narratives hidden within the painting, he grappled with a core truth. Healing only comes when we confront the source of our sorrow. Hours later, Jonah sat amidst crumpled paper and paint-splattered tools, a flicker of confidence igniting in his chest. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about their shared legacy. Finally embracing his identity as an artist, he began mapping out a plan to approach the billionaire. This moment wasn't merely an awakening, it was a rebellion against the silence that had suffocated his lineage for far too long. But just as determination was replacing doubt, a chilling thought crept into his mind. What if the confrontation wasn't just one-sided? What if the billionaire had his own intentions for that painting, motivations that were entwined with the very fate Jonah sought to confront? The air thickened with tension as Jonah's resolve hardened. He was ready for the fight ahead. But what he didn't know was how deeply intertwined their paths had become, and the revelations that awaited him on the other side of the confrontation. With the full weight of his family's history crashing down upon him, he prepared to step beyond the threshold, unaware that this journey would threaten everything he thought he understood about himself and their legacy. The time had come to face his fears. The question was, could he handle the truth? Jonah sat alone in the attic, the silence enveloping him like a thick fog. The momentum of his earlier resolve seemed to hang in the air, both tangible and elusive. As he stared at the patchy blank canvas, he felt the heavy pulse of his heart echoing in the stillness. This was not just a moment for artistic revival, it was a reckoning. His notebook lay open, pages filled with sketches, musings, and questions that dug deeper than the surface of paint and canvases. One question rose above the tumult, pressing against Jonah's consciousness like a dull ache. What did he truly want from the confrontation with the billionaire? The answer eluded him. Was it vengeance, or was it understanding? Perhaps a part of him craved closure, a chance to say the words he never articulated to his father, to embody the words of his ancestors, and to reclaim a narrative tainted by years of silence and pain. With each passing moment, doubt gnawed at him. Could he genuinely confront this figure of wealth and power? Did he possess the strength to question the very foundations of his family's suffering? He took a deep breath, attempting to still the fluttering in his chest. He realized this fight transcended personal gain. It was about uncovering truths, not just about the painting, but about himself. He needed to learn more about the billionaire, the man who had unknowingly become a foil to his own family's saga. Jonah envisioned gathering stories of those affected by the man's actions, weaving them together like threads in a tapestry. He couldn't confront a ghost. He had to approach this man with substance, armed with the testimonies that echoed the whispers of his own family's past. Uncertainty coursed through Jonah's veins as he envisioned the encounter. The imagined confrontation played out like a scene from a film, him defiant and poised, standing in front of a wall of wealth and indifference. Would he find the conviction to expose the depths of exploitation? What if the billionaire embraced his own narrative as a way to shield himself from the pain he had perpetuated? Inspired, Jonah closed his notebook and rose from the makeshift studio. He ventured down from the attic, his pulse steadying as determination reclaimed its place in his heart. Each step down the creaky stairs felt like shedding a layer of apprehension, replaced with a burgeoning sense of purpose. Outside, the harsh sunlight greeted him, illuminating the path to the local library where he hoped to uncover stories lost to time. The library was a treasure trove, a sanctuary bursting with voices that could inform his approach. As he looked through old newspaper articles and archived letters, Jonah felt a sense of empowerment grow. He was uncovering a multifaceted truth, a legacy far richer and more complex than the singular narrative he had inherited. Hours sprawled into a tapestry of discovery. Jonah pieced together stories of exploitation, resilience, and triumph, each tale a powerful brushstroke that painted a broader picture of what had come before him. Yet as he delved deeper, one name consistently lingered in the records: the billionaires. The connections expanded, revealing layers of history that bound their families together in ways Jonah hadn't anticipated. With every new revelation, the urgency to confront the billionaire crystallized. There was history here, his family's history, woven into the very fabric of this man's legacy. Jonah returned home, the weight of his findings heavy upon him, but electrifying nonetheless. This confrontation was no longer about anger. It was about the potential for understanding, for a shared truth that could alter not just their fates, but the legacy that had shadowed them both. As he crossed the threshold back into the attic, ready to commit his newfound knowledge to paper, a gripping thought pulled at him. What if, at the heart of this confrontation, was a hidden thread, a connection between the two of them that could mend or unravel the very fabric of who they were destined to become? The journey was intensifying, and Jonah couldn't shake the feeling that every step taken brought him closer to a revelation that had the potential to redefine everything. The air crackled with possibility as he resumed sketching, unaware of the profound change looming on the horizon. Would his confrontation unlock a deeper understanding, or would it unearth buried secrets that threatened to shatter all he had worked to reclaim? Jonah settled into a rhythm, the hastily created sketches in front of him transforming into something more substantial. Each stroke of his pencil bore the weight of his discoveries, laying the groundwork not only for a confrontation, but also for an awakening. He needed to channel all the raw energy that churned within, his findings, his family history, the anticipated meeting with the billionaire, into a cohesive vision. As he worked, the thought of approaching the billionaire loomed larger in his mind. He pondered over the intended outcome of their encounter. It was one thing to confront a man for the hurt he had caused. It was another to seek common ground. Jonah's strategy shifted yet again, veering from a quest for confrontation to a pursuit of connection. What if he could find a way to bridge their worlds instead of merely colliding? The idea ignited a flicker of hope behind his doubt. His new strategy required preparation beyond sketching. He needed to rehearse his words and frame the narrative he wished to convey. Deep down, Jonah understood that his true audience wasn't merely the billionaire, but the echoes of his family that lived in each fabric of the narrative he was weaving. He had to protect their story while unlocking another, softer truth about the man who had unwittingly played a central role in his life.
Setting his sketches aside, Jonah took to pacing the small attic. Each step reverberated with the urgency coursing through his veins. He began vocalizing his thoughts, practicing phrases he hoped would pierce through barriers instead of raising defenses. Would he focus on trauma inflicted or resilience found? Which angle would resonate more deeply? A sudden burst of creativity struck him. He grabbed a fresh canvas and began painting, rapid strokes guided by instinct rather than design. The colors spilled from his brush like the stories he had uncovered, vibrant and full of life. Others would see mere chaos, but Jonah understood that this was the very essence of his journey, a confluence of family history, pain, and potential understanding. This emotional release transformed his perspective. With paint smudged on his hands, he felt the rhythm of conviction pulse through him. This project was not solely about confronting a billion-dollar empire, but about reclaiming his family's narrative, placing it alongside a man whose actions had inadvertently intertwined their fates. He could shape the future by acknowledging the past. It was about finding reconciliation rather than retaliation.
As the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting a warm glow that filled the attic, Jonah realized that his confrontation with the billionaire would encompass so much more than mere words. It was a chance for catharsis, for both himself and for the other man, for moments that could lay the groundwork for a genuine dialogue, a chance to break the chains of generational pain. Jonah could feel the pressure building within him, a pivotal moment palpable on the horizon. He needed to find out more about his adversary's story, to uncover layers that might reveal vulnerability behind the expensive suits and polished demeanor. Gathering more information became imperative. He resolved to dig even deeper before facing the man directly. What threads could be unraveled in the investor's past? How had his decisions impacted not only the lives of Jonah's family, but his own? Each question he pondered set his heart racing. He reached for his notebook, prepared to map out not just his thoughts, but a tactical approach, words that would cut through pretense and deliver the truth. The weight of this impending confrontation loomed large, but for the first time, a flicker of excitement danced alongside his anxiety. Would finding common ground illuminate the path toward reconciliation, or would it escalate the conflict, pulling Jonah deeper into a battle he wasn't prepared to wage? That question hung in the air, electrifying the space around him as he began to outline his approach. The stakes were high, and he stood at the precipice of something transformational. Jonah's heart raced, not from fear, but from the stirring resolve that surged within him. He knew that when he finally decided to face the billionaire, the confrontation would not just be about the past. They would engage in a dialogue about their intertwined futures. But how could he ensure it wouldn't simply devolve into another cycle of hurt? Staring into the darkness that filled the corners of his attic, Jonah sat down, poised to draft an approach that would not only be impactful, but also forged from discovery, intention, and perhaps understanding. Beyond that door to confrontation lay not only answers, but possibly a collaboration, a chance to reshape their narratives together. As he wrote, the realization hit sharply. Perhaps they were both seeking redemption. The question now loomed: was he ready to brave the storm of that revelation, stepping through the open door of possibility? Jonah spent the next few days consumed by the need to prepare, his mind buzzing with thoughts that unraveled as quickly as they formed. The more he dug into the billionaire's past, the more threads he unearthed, each revelation a glimpse into the layers that shaped the man whose decisions had impacted his family so profoundly. It wasn't just about journalism or research, it became a personal quest, each detail guiding him toward a greater understanding. Discovering the struggles the billionaire faced during his formative years stirred complex emotions within Jonah. How could someone rise to prominence and still maintain a sense of humanity? The juxtaposition intrigued him, an empire built on the backs of the vulnerable next to a vulnerable child navigating a turbulent upbringing.
Armed with new information, Jonah crafted narratives that could resonate. He recalled the stories told by his grandparents, tales woven from the very fabric of resilience. As he typed, a sense of purpose drenched his determination. Each draft became a manifesto designed to advocate for understanding rather than resentment. What if the narrative he built served as a mirror rather than an indictment? He had the power to reflect humanity back to the billionaire, to remind him of the lives his decisions had touched. During this evolution, Jonah also faced moments of doubt. What if the billionaire was unmoved? What if they fell into the stereotypical trap of confrontation? Anxious thoughts danced like shadows around him, but he quickly dismissed them. He could not let his insecurities shackle his pursuit of connection. Facing his fears became essential to his growth. He recognized that vulnerability might well pave the way for harmony. Jonah transformed his attic into a war room of sorts, layering his findings across walls like a detective piecing together a puzzle. Visuals and phrases intertwined, showing the sheer impact they both had on each other's lives. He stepped back and examined the sprawling montage before him, aware that the convergence of their stories could potentially lead to something healing. As the deadline loomed closer, Jonah gathered the courage to reach out to the billionaire's office. Drafting an email felt like an act of bravery, a bid to open a discourse that could crumble or soar. He reiterated his intent to discuss the past, but keenly emphasized the potentials for mutual growth. Clarity of purpose fueled his hands, and the melancholy weight he had once felt from the past shifted into an anticipation of what lay ahead. With the click of send, something within him shifted as well. The seeds of change had been planted, and for the first time he retreated from the dark corners of his insecurities. He leaned into vulnerability, ready to embrace the complexity of what lay ahead, the unknown path toward reconciliation. Days stretched with an almost electric pulse, each moment heavy with expectation. He spent his time focused, painting, writing, imagining possibilities. But doubt clawed at the edges of his resolve. Would the billionaire understand? Could a conversation lead to healing, or would it spiral into a confrontation that fed their mutual pain? He had to confront his doubts head-on, recognizing that the very act of reaching out was an affirmation of his growth.
As he painted late one night, the strokes became episodes of release, letting fears merge into brushstrokes that transformed chaos into coherence. He was no longer simply a young artist seeking revenge. He was an architect of narrative, building bridges where he once thought walls stood firm. Then his phone buzzed with a notification, pulling him from his creative trance. The message felt monumental, a harbinger of what was to come. The billionaire had agreed to meet. Elation mixed with trepidation surged through him, confirming that the moment was closer than he had ever anticipated. Jonah took a deep breath, an echo of calm nestled within the chaos of his thoughts. The moment he had envisioned was on the verge of becoming a reality. He now faced an unprecedented question. How would he navigate the uncharted waters of this encounter? The challenge wasn't merely to confront the past, but to shape their futures anew. An exhilarating tension consumed him, layers of intensity coiled tight. The stakes were monumental, and Jonah understood now that each choice made would resonate beyond the room they would meet. He squared his shoulders, resolute. It was time. As he prepared for this pivotal meeting, a thought struck sharply. Was he ready to carve a new path for both of them, even if it meant baring his soul? The enormity of the challenge loomed ahead, leaving Jonah grappling with his answer as he headed toward the day that could redefine everything. Jonah woke up that day with an unsettled mixture of hope and anxiety dancing in his chest. The clock ticked loudly, each second echoing through his mind as he meticulously prepared for the meeting. He had visualized this moment countless times, conjuring up every possible scenario in his imagination, yet the reality remained hauntingly unpredictable. He donned a simple yet professional outfit, one that would convey respect without overshadowing his own identity. The drive to the meeting place felt surreal, the streets blurring past him like fleeting moments in time.
Every car honk and pedestrian's chatter seemed to echo his internal dialogue, questions ricocheting through his thoughts. What if he didn't make himself clear? What if the billionaire dismissed him outright? These fears felt heavier than the weight of his intent, clinging to him like a shadow. As he parked and approached the towering glass building that encapsulated his childhood nemesis, the billionaire's success felt almost monumental. Jonah hesitated briefly under the awning, looking up at the pristine structure that stood like a silent sentinel of power. What was it about this place that imbued him with both dread and excitement? He was about to confront not just the man who had shaped his family's pain, but also confront his own past misgivings and fears. Inside, the ambiance was strikingly calm, a sharp contrast to the tempest raging within Jonah.
He could hear the low hum of conversations and the click of heels on polished floors, each sound a reminder of the high-stakes world he was entering. As he approached the reception desk, his palms felt clammy against the fabric of his suit, betraying his attempt at poised confidence. "Mr. Jonah Reed," he announced, offering his name like a badge of courage. The receptionist smiled courteously and gestured him to take a seat. He settled into the plush chair, using this moment to breathe deeply, attempting to consolidate his scattered thoughts. He found himself glancing around the lobby, absorbing small details that felt oddly comforting. The artwork on the walls, the glow of the modern decor, everything designed to impress. As he waited, Jonah reflected on the gravity of their impending conversation. It wasn't merely about unpacking grievances, rather it held the potential to alter the narrative of their individual stories. Still, he struggled to transform the urgency of his mission into actionable strategies. How could he articulate his truths without inciting the defenses he expected from a man of such privilege? The tension sharpened as the elevator doors opened, and the billionaire emerged flanked by two aides. Jonah's heart raced at an electrifying pace, fueled by an instinct to retreat. But he stood firm. This was it. He had to step up. The billionaire, clad in an impeccably tailored suit, exuded an air of authority, but Jonah sensed the glimmer of hesitation in his eyes. "Jonah," the billionaire said, his tone smooth yet cautiously probing, "thank you for coming." The very structure of that greeting, simple yet heavy with unspoken implications, cut right to the core of Jonah's purpose. "Thank you for meeting with me," replied Jonah, astonished by the steadiness of his voice. He had rehearsed this moment, yet the stakes now felt terrifyingly real. They settled into a conference room designed to showcase opulence and comfort, yet Jonah's awareness sharpened around the unease hovering in the air. As they began to discuss their respective narratives, Jonah honed in on the emotional threads that wove between them. He chose his words carefully, not as weapons, but as bridges. But just as Jonah began to share his perspectives, he noticed a flicker of impatience in the billionaire's demeanor, a subtle shift that hinted at unresolved conflict beneath a polished surface. One question blazed through his mind. How far would he have to reach to pierce the veneer of defensiveness? Jonah sought a moment to analyze the patterns in their interaction. This could either devolve into a mere transaction of grievances or evolve into something transformative. With the future of their conversation teetering on a precipice, Jonah realized it was not just the billionaire who needed to confront his past. He too was unsettled by the ghosts of resentment lingering within. The revelation struck him hard. Would he have the strength to lay bare the vulnerability that had propelled him here, or would he falter at the critical moment? As he prepared to respond, a memory of his grandparents' resilience surged within him, rekindling his resolve. Jonah inhaled deeply, ready to step fully into a dialogue that could unravel long-held bitterness. But just as he opened his mouth, an unexpected sound shattered the tension, a phone ringing violently in the quiet room, both startling and demanding attention. Jonah felt the weight of it all shift. The stakes had just elevated as a decision loomed before him. Would the billionaire answer,
Or would it pull them deeper into an unforeseen confrontation? The air crackled with potential, but Jonah's path remained uncertain, hinging on that fateful moment. Jonah's heart raced as the billionaire's gaze flickered to the source of the ringing phone, a primal instinct urging him to capitalize on this rare moment of distraction. There was a split second when the billionaire hesitated, the tension in the room so thick that Jonah could almost feel it in the air. Then, as if snapping back from a reverie, the billionaire reached into his pocket, retrieving his phone with a sleek fluidity born of habit. "Excuse me," he said, his voice now distant, a lifeline thrown into a suddenly tumultuous sea. Jonah was momentarily engulfed in an anxious silence. The billionaire walked to the far end of the room, his figure obscured by a glass wall where hushed tones absorbed the conversation. In that fleeting absence, Jonah felt the weight of expectation settle on his shoulders. This was his chance, not only to confront the man before him, but to confront the tangled emotions that clutched him tightly. As he sat there, 1,000 thoughts coursed through his mind. The uneasiness of their interaction simmered beneath the surface, and Jonah felt vulnerable, the very thing he had long avoided revealing. He had come to demand recognition, acknowledgement of the pain he had inherited, but was he prepared to bear the truths of his own heart? With the billionaire's back turned, his courage flickered. Memories flooded his mind, hours spent with his grandparents, who had shared their own stories of struggle and resilience. It was their enduring spirit that had forged his identity, and now, as he faced his past, Jonah realized he was not just there to express fury or frustration. He was there to expose his own vulnerabilities, the very root of his motivation to seek closure. The quiet enveloped him, stirring up a strange sense of power. He understood now that the stakes went beyond the billionaire. It was about the revelations that lay buried within him. Jonah inhaled, his resolve hardening. How he presented himself in that room mattered deeply. It was a chance to rewrite not only his narrative, but potentially that of a man whose decisions had long reverberated in Jonah's life. The billionaire's conversation unfolded outside, punctuated by an occasional chuckle and the rustle of papers. With each sound, Jonah's confidence grew, calling forth uncharted clarity. This was not merely a confrontation, it was a potential reconciliation of two lives shaped by shared history, albeit separated by vastly different circumstances. As the billionaire returned and resumed his seat, his demeanor had shifted slightly, no longer just the confident titan of industry, but a man who bore the burden of choices made long ago. Jonah seized the opportunity, feeling a surge of empowerment rush through him. He leaned forward, determined to steer their dialogue towards honesty. "I didn't come here just to highlight the past," he began, his voice steady. "I came to understand it, to understand you, and perhaps myself in the process." There was a flicker of surprise in the billionaire's eyes, but Jonah pressed on, eager to unravel the complexity of their relationship. The walls that had once existed between them began to crumble as he laid bare the emotions that had weighed heavily on his heart, the hurt, the resentment, but also the understanding that only came with time. Jonah sensed the billionaire's defenses softening, the atmosphere evolving into something that felt almost transformative. With each revelation he shared, Jonah found pieces of himself emerging from the shadows, leading him closer to the realization that healing could only begin through shared narratives. Yet just as the conversation deepened, a flicker of hesitation crossed the billionaire's face, a momentary glance at the ornate painting commanding attention behind Jonah, as if staring into an abyss where secrets were held captive. "Can we address that?" the billionaire finally asked, breaking the spell of their vulnerability. Jonah followed his gaze, feeling a chill run down his spine. It was not just a painting, it was a metaphor for the hidden truths, a symbol of everything that loomed over them both. The question hung heavy, resonating within Jonah like a dormant truth yearning to be set free. Was he ready to unearth the darker secrets hidden behind their shared histories, to confront not only the past, but potentially even more layers of hurt and revelation? The moment trembled with potential, and Jonah realized that the conversation might be leading towards a discovery neither of them had anticipated. And deep inside, a tiny voice whispered, maybe it was time to unveil the hidden chapters of their lives before the moment slipped away entirely. Jonah's pulse quickened as he locked eyes with the billionaire, realizing that this was the pivot point of their encounter. The uncertainty that had initially plagued him gave way to a burning curiosity. What lay behind the veil of that painting? What secrets had woven themselves into the fabric of their intertwined pasts? Address what? Jonah asked, his voice steadier than he felt.
There was a weight to the question, one that could crack the surface of the poised yet fragile relationship they were building. The billionaire leaned back in his seat, weighing his response carefully. That painting, it holds the story of my family, a story I've kept hidden for too long. There was a tremor in his voice that hinted at deeper scars, connections that reverberated through time. Jonah felt something shift within him. The billionaire was not as untouchable as he once seemed. Behind the facade of wealth and power lay the bruises of personal battles. Compelled to peel back the layers, Jonah asked, "What is it you've kept hidden?" "I lost my father to the very ambition that brought me success," the billionaire confessed, his gaze drifting back to the painting as if it held the answers. He was just a man lost in his dreams, chasing everything and yet finding nothing of value in it all. After his death, that painting became a reminder of what I thought I was supposed to pursue. Jonah absorbed this, the connections to his own life spiraling in unexpected ways. "And you think it held you back?" "It defined me," the billionaire replied somberly. "For years I built my existence around the idea of becoming my father's legacy, every decision, every strategy. But that painting shows a deeper truth about what it means to be alive." Jonah felt the stirrings of empathy, sparking a connection that moved beyond anger towards understanding. He found himself caught between what he had always believed about the billionaire and the vulnerable man before him. It was a reversal that turned his initial approach on its head. Perhaps rather than seeking vengeance or closure, he was being called to understand not just the past, but the evolving present. "What revelation do you see in that painting?" Jonah probed gently. The billionaire straightened, a flicker of enlightenment brightening his eyes. "Something I still struggle to articulate. It's not the success that defines us, but the connections we forge along the way. I chose wealth over relationships, and here I am, experiencing the pain that comes with that loneliness." Jonah grappled with his own experiences, the loss of relationships in pursuit of a better life. Memories of his childhood flooded his thoughts, his grandparents' sacrifices and their unwavering belief in the importance of family. Did he, too, risk walking a similar path, blinded by ambition at the expense of the bonds that mattered? "I understand you more than you know," Jonah admitted slowly, his thoughts weaving a tapestry of shared struggles. "The pursuit of recognition almost led me to alienate those closest to me. I've come here seeking clarity, but perhaps what I need is to find forgiveness for myself and you." Silence hung thick in the air. Shapes in the room cast into new perspectives as they reflected on their words. The narrative was shifting, a reclamation of lost humanity, yet Jonah's internal compass suggested an unfinished resolution. "Maybe it's time for us both to confront what lies behind the surface," the billionaire suggested softly. "Then let's face it," Jonah replied firmly, a sense of resolve washing over him. They were on the brink of confrontation, discovery, and healing. Just as the air thickened with anticipation, Jonah's phone vibrated in his pocket, jarring him out of the moment.
Artifacts of his old life rushed back to the forefront. What if this was a message spelling distraction or even bad news? He hesitated, torn between the bond he was forming and the familiarity of his past. "Go ahead," the billionaire encouraged, noting his reluctance. "We both need to see how our lives have changed, even to the smallest details." Jonah swallowed hard, sensing that whatever awaited him beyond the walls of this intimate conversation might hold the key to his own evolution. With trembling hands, he pulled out his phone, the screen lighting up with a name he had almost forgotten to dread. A new voice from his past beckoned, one that could either shatter this moment or weave it into something profoundly impactful. Could he handle the fallout from this intrusion? Would facing that voice lead to deeper truths, or simply into chaos? The moment lingered, heavy yet electric, heralding the crossroads where revelation awaited. Jonah stared at the phone, his heart hammering against his ribcage. The display flickered as criticism ran through his mind. Was this a bad idea? Perhaps it would be simpler to ignore the call and refocus on this moment, the potential for understanding, the changing tide of his relationship with the man across from him. Yet something deep inside urged him to pick up, the very same urge that had driven him to confront this billionaire in the first place. He swiped to accept the call, and suddenly it felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "Jonah," Rebecca's voice dripped with familiarity. There was an underlying tension in her tone that hinted this wasn't just a casual check-in. "Jonah," he managed, though part of him still couldn't believe this was happening. "I didn't expect to hear from you again. How are you?" That question hung in the air, heavy with unsaid words. Instead of diving into his emotional turmoil, he took a deep breath. "I'm good. Busy with work, trying to keep everything together." There was a pause, then the warmth in her voice cracked like ice. "You always were about keeping it together. You built a wall around yourself, Jonah. You didn't want anyone in." Her words stung like whiplash. With each syllable, memories of closed doors and muffled apologies resurfaced. Moments where he'd chosen ambition over her, where he had turned his back on the most profound connection he had ever known. "Yeah, I know," Jonah's voice broke, revealing the cracks in his carefully cultivated armor. "I'm learning that maybe I didn't handle things well." In his peripheral vision, he sensed the billionaire's intense observation, as though he was witnessing a cathartic moment of reckoning, an internal confrontation both for Jonah and the man who once regarded ambition as his only ally in life. "Listen, Jonah, the reason I'm calling," Rebecca began hesitantly, "is because I need your help. There's been something I've been dealing with, and I thought—" He felt a surge of emotions wash over him. So this was it. This was the moment that could pull him back into the past, a web woven from strands of regret and unresolved tension. But deep within him, a newfound resolve was rising. It was time to confront the ghosts that had haunted him, to acknowledge not only what they had lost, but also what they might still salvage. "I'm here for you," he replied, the sincerity in his voice catching even him off guard. "Really? I thought you wouldn't want to be involved. I didn't want to disrupt your life." He rubbed the back of his neck, remembering the tension there, remembering the reasons he had shut the door on so many relationships, so many chances. "Rebecca, I need to face this, whatever it is. I can't keep running after my dreams and leaving everyone behind." Her silence suggested she was digesting his words. Jonah turned to the billionaire, whose expression mirrored his own reflective energy. They were both at a crossroads, and for Jonah, answering Rebecca's call was more than just reconnecting. It marked a shift toward introspection that pushed against his boundaries of success and pervading loneliness. "To be honest, I wasn't prepared for this, but it feels like—" He trailed off, noticing the undercurrent of gravity. "Maybe it's time to confront what we both lost." "Are you saying you want to see me?" There was a flicker of hope in her voice that resonated with Jonah's own rising expectations. A firm sense of determination settled within him. "Yes, let's meet and talk. We can both face what's been forgotten." As he hung up, Jonah turned back to the billionaire, who wore an enlightened smile amid the heavy atmosphere. What realization was approaching? Jonah understood he was about to embark on a journey that intertwined both his past and present, weaving together the threads of forgiveness and growth.
"Seems we both have our layers to peel back," the billionaire said softly. "Let's see what we find," Jonah replied. The tension lingered, blossoming into a palpable hope that this confrontation could spark something revitalizing. His mind sparked with urgency. What awaited him in the confrontation with Rebecca? Would facing their shared past lead to healing, or would it unravel everything he had worked towards? Jonah knew he was at the precipice, the moment poised for revelation. Jonah's heart thrummed with determination as the echo of his conversation with Rebecca reverberated in his mind. The promise of a reunion with his past hung heavy yet exhilarating in the air, filling him with an urgency he had not felt in years. This wasn't merely about facing a romantic history. It was about confronting the choices that had shaped him, the ambitions that had blinded him, and the relationships he had let slip through his fingers. In that charged atmosphere of the conference room, he turned to the billionaire, whose gaze held quiet understanding. What they both needed was awareness, a shared acknowledgement of their journeys and the consequences of their decisions. Jonah realized that the man across from him bore similar burdens, whispers of ambition shadowing the human connections that had been sacrificed in the pursuit of success. "Seems we are both navigating uncharted waters," Jonah said, the gravity of their parallel paths finally clicking into place. The billionaire nodded, his expression shifting from one of dominance to genuine vulnerability. "It's easy to forget that behind every decision there's a personal cost. I've run from my father's legacy for too long, believing that attainment would fill the void left by his absence. But perhaps it's time to redefine what success truly means." As Jonah absorbed those words, he recognized the common thread binding them together, a yearning for redemption and a desperate need to confront their pasts. "It's like we've both been living in shadow, chasing dreams while abandoning those we love. That's been my story, too." The billionaire regarded him thoughtfully, his demeanor shifting from that of an adversary to a collaborator in truth-seeking. "You deserve to reclaim what was lost, Jonah. But to do that, you need to lay your ghosts to rest," he said, a newfound urgency compelling his voice. "Meeting with Rebecca, that could be the start." Jonah felt a wave of resonance wash over him. "I need to approach her with honesty, share the impact my decisions had on our relationship." The billionaire's expression brightened. "It seems we both have work to do. For me, it means confronting the legacy I've carried for so long, a sculpture that needs reshaping. For you, embracing vulnerability may guide you toward healing." Jonah nodded, feeling a sense of solidarity in their shared struggles. Together, they were carving paths toward acknowledgement, paths that could redefine their futures while salvaging the past. As their discussion deepened, they began to explore the complexities of their experiences, sharing anecdotes of loss, ambition, and the relentless pursuit of connection. Each revelation drew them closer, elucidating the narrative of two men shaped by the same society, yet driven by different motivations. Jonah could feel the weight lifting. They were no longer adversaries branded by inherited pain. With each passing moment, Jonah's confidence swelled. His encounter with Rebecca was looming, and he felt prepared to embrace whatever awaited him. Not only did he seek healing in his personal life, but he also realized he could step forward as a catalyst for change in the billionaire's existence as well. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows in the conference room, each flicker of light imbued with the potential for transformation. Jonah sensed he had begun to understand the true meaning of legacy. It wasn't merely about success, it was about the connections he fostered, the wounds he addressed, and the stories he sought to reclaim. As he prepared himself to meet Rebecca, Jonah felt a wave of clarity wash over him.
This confrontation was not just about claiming the past, but crafting a new narrative, an opportunity to begin uniting the fragments of his life. He could shape something enduring, learning from the echoes of his decisions, and forging a brighter future not only for himself, but for those he held dear. Jonah returned his focus to the billionaire, who seemed more human than ever in that moment. "Let's make a pact," he said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Let's commit to confronting our histories honestly and to fostering a dialogue that opens pathways to healing." The billionaire extended his hand, a firm yet warm grip sealing their agreement. "It's time to mend what's broken." Jonah left the conference room that day not just as a young artist ready to reclaim his narrative, but as a man transformed, steered by growth, empathy, and a sharpened understanding of what really matters. As he prepared for his meeting with Rebecca, an inner solidity buoyed him. Perhaps healing was not just a solitary pursuit, but a shared journey, one that could enlighten both of their paths, igniting hope even in the darkest corners of their hearts. Jonah rose to face his past, not merely to confront it, but to embrace it, ready to together pick up the pieces for a more profound, more meaningful future. Jonah took a deep breath, sensing that he was finally ready to reclaim his legacy, not only for himself, but for the love that lingered quietly, waiting to be reborn. And at that exhilarating intersection of self-discovery and resolution, he found himself stepping into his power, prepared to rewrite the narrative of his life, one brushstroke at a time.
Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to support the channel. This is the moment to show your dedication. Don't wait even one more second to share. You won't want to miss what happens next.